where real stories teach real English. Welcome to Woo English. Have you ever wondered how one quiet child with messy hair and deep eyes changed the way we see time, space, and even the universe? This is not just a science story. This is the story of a dreamer, a rebel, a man who believed in peace, truth, and the power of asking why. In this audiobook, written in B1 English, you'll follow the life of Albert Einstein. From a silent boy to a voice heard around the world, each chapter will teach you English. But more than that, it will teach you courage, curiosity, and how one idea can change everything. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. A Strange Little Boy. Have you ever met a child who doesn't speak? Not for a few days, not for a few months, but for years? That was Albert Einstein. He was born on March 14th, 1879, in the city of Ulm, in Germany. His parents were worried. He was silent. Too silent. They waited and waited. But Albert said almost nothing. People whispered, "Is something wrong with the boy? Maybe he's slow. Maybe he'll never learn to speak." But inside Albert's mind, something magical was happening. He was watching the world. He was listening. He was thinking. And when he finally spoke, he spoke slowly, carefully, like every word was a puzzle. Albert's head was big when he was a baby, very big. Some people laughed, others stared, but Albert didn't care. He wasn't like other children, and he didn't want to be. At age 5, Albert got sick. He stayed in bed for many days. One day, his father gave him a gift. Something small, something simple, a compass. Albert looked at the little needle inside. It moved. But why? He turned the compass. He shook it. He placed it on the table. Still, the needle pointed in the same direction. Albert was amazed. What makes it move? He asked himself. What force is there? Something I can't see. This moment changed his life. He discovered a deep truth. There are hidden things in the universe, things you cannot see, but they are real. Gravity, magnetism, time. And Albert wanted to understand them all. He started asking big questions, but not everyone liked that. In school, Albert was bored. He didn't enjoy the lessons. He didn't enjoy the rules. The teachers said, "Einstein is a problem. He doesn't follow instructions. He's always daydreaming." But Albert wasn't lazy. He was curious. He wanted to learn in his own way. And when he opened a math book, his eyes lit up. Numbers, shapes, patterns. He loved it. He taught himself algebra at age 12. He read science books at night for fun. When other boys played games, Albert did experiments in his mind. He asked himself, what if I could ride a beam of light? What would I see? Would time stop? Strange questions, crazy questions, but not for Albert Einstein. At home, life was not easy. His father had a business, but it failed. The family lost money. They had to move to Munich, then later to Italy. Albert stayed behind to finish school. But he was unhappy. He missed his family. He didn't like the school, the rules, the punishments. One day, he left school without telling anyone. He walked out and never came back. Was it the wrong choice? Number. It was the beginning of something great. Albert Einstein was not a normal boy. He didn't talk early. He didn't smile a lot. He didn't follow the rules. But he followed something stronger. His curiosity. He wanted to understand the world, even if the world didn't understand him. Years later, people would ask him, "Did you know as a child that you were a genius?" And Albert would smile and say, "Number I was just passionately curious." But this is only the beginning. The boy with wild hair was about to shake the world, not with weapons, not with power, but with ideas. Chapter 2. Numbers and Violins. Albert Einstein was growing. He still didn't talk much. He didn't like loud games. He didn't like fighting or shouting. But he loved to be alone, with his thoughts, with his books, and with his violin. Yes, his violin. When Albert was just 6 years old, his mother gave him music lessons. He didn't like them at first. The teacher was too strict. The exercises were boring. But then he heard a piece by Mozart, and something changed inside him. The notes, the feeling, the rhythm. It spoke to him. It opened a door in his heart. From that day, he played the violin every day, not to become famous, but to feel something beautiful. At the same time, Albert found another kind of music, mathematics. He was around 12 when he found a geometry book, a full textbook. He opened it and couldn't stop reading. Each shape had meaning. Each number had power. Each line, each proof. It was like solving a mystery. He called it his sacred geometry book. Other children read comics. Albert read about triangles, circles, and the magic of pi. He even started solving problems on his own. Hard problems, college-level problems. By age 13, he was studying calculus, a subject most people learn in university. No one told him to do it. He wanted to, because Albert had something powerful, a love for learning. But school still wasn't easy. In fact, it was hard. The teachers were strict, the lessons were boring, and the system punished students for asking questions. Albert didn't like that. He wanted to understand why, not just memorize facts. One day, a teacher told him, "You will never succeed in life, Einstein. You show no respect. You have no future here." Can you imagine? A teacher said those words to Albert Einstein. But Albert didn't believe him. Deep inside, he knew. Success is not about obeying rules. It's about thinking differently. Meanwhile, at home, things were getting worse. His father's business had failed again. The whole family had to leave Germany and move to Italy. Albert was just 15. He stayed behind, alone, to finish school. But he was unhappy, so one day he made a choice. He quit school. He packed his bags and walked out. For months, Albert lived with his family in Milan, Italy. He didn't go to school. He didn't have a job. But he read and read and read. He studied physics. He studied math. He read famous scientists like Maxwell, Newton, and Kant. He taught himself, like always. But he knew, if he wanted to become a scientist, he needed a diploma. So he decided to apply to a famous university in Switzerland, ETH Zurich. He took the entrance exam, but he failed. Yes, Albert Einstein failed the entrance exam. Not in math, not in science, but in French, history, and literature. They told him, "You are not ready. Come back next year." Did Albert give up? Number. He studied harder. He took classes. He improved. And 1 year later, he passed. He was accepted. At last, Albert was going to study science at one of the best schools in Europe. It wasn't easy. He didn't always agree with the professors. He didn't like learning by memory. But he met new friends. He studied new ideas. He found a few teachers who believed in him. And slowly, quietly, the world of physics opened to him. At night, he still played his violin. It helped him think. It helped him dream. And Albert had big dreams. He didn't want to just learn science. He wanted to change it. Chapter 3. Leaving Germany. Albert Einstein had finally done it. He passed the entrance exam. He joined ETH Zurich. He was ready to become a scientist. But things were not so easy. At the university, Albert wasn't a perfect student. He skipped some classes. He studied what he liked and ignored what he didn't. He didn't want to memorize things. He wanted to understand them. He wanted to ask new questions. Some professors didn't like that. They thought he was too independent, too strange. One professor even refused to help him get a job. So when Albert graduated in 1900, no one offered him a position, no university, no research lab, nothing. Imagine that. A young man with a sharp mind, and no one wanted to hire him. Albert was poor. He had no money. He sent letters to schools, to companies, to friends. No answer. He even thought about giving up science, but just when things felt hopeless. A friend helped him. His name was Marcel Grossman. Marcel's father had connections. He helped Albert get a small job at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. It wasn't a science job. Albert had to look at inventions and decide if they were new or not. It was boring. It was slow. but it gave him time. And that's all he needed. During the day, Albert worked. At night, he dreamed. He read physics books. He filled notebooks with strange ideas. He thought about time, space, and light. And he talked. He met with 2 friends every week. They called themselves the Olympia Academy. Just 3 young men discussing big ideas. They read books. They drank coffee. They laughed. They argued. And slowly, something powerful began to grow inside Albert's mind. He asked himself, what if time isn't always the same? What if 2 people can see time differently? What if space can bend? Crazy ideas. But Albert believed them. He didn't have a lab. He didn't have money. But he had the most powerful tool of all: his imagination. At the same time, another part of his life was changing. Albert had fallen in love with a girl named Mileva Maric. She was a brilliant student. She studied physics, too. She challenged him, supported him, argued with him. They married in 1903. Soon, they had a son. They named him Hans Albert. Albert was now a father, a husband, a full-time worker. But his mind never stopped working. Then came the year 1905. People now call it Einstein's miracle year. Because in that one year, Albert published 4 scientific papers. Each one was important. But one of them was about to change the world. It was about light and energy. It said light comes in small packets, like particles. This explained something called the photoelectric effect. This paper would later win him the Nobel Prize. Another paper explained Brownian motion, how tiny particles move in water. It helped prove that atoms really exist. A third paper introduced special relativity. And in that theory, Albert wrote something small, a little equation. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. It looked simple, but it had deep meaning. Mass and energy are 2 forms of the same thing. A small amount of matter can become a huge amount of energy. No one had ever said that before. At first, not many people noticed. He was still just a patent clerk. No university job, no big title. But the scientific world was starting to wake up. They read his papers. They scratched their heads. They said, "Who is this Einstein?" He was only 26 years old, but he had already shaken the foundations of physics. Albert Einstein had left Germany years before, as a student with no plan. Now he was a quiet man, working in a small office, thinking the biggest thoughts in the world, and he was just getting started. Chapter 4. A Patent Office Genius. He wasn't wearing a lab coat. He didn't teach at a university. He didn't have a team of scientists. Albert Einstein sat at a desk in the Swiss Patent Office. Around him were papers, stamps, and drawings of strange machines. But inside his head, there was a universe of light, time, and energy. He wasn't just checking inventions, he was rewriting the laws of physics. The year was 1905. Albert was 26. And in that 1 year, he published 4 papers that would change science forever. The most shocking one? Special relativity. It said something bold, something no one believed before. Time is not the same for everyone. Yes, you heard that right. Time is not fixed. It can move faster or slower depending on how fast you're moving. Imagine you're on a fast train, almost as fast as light. Your clock ticks slower than the one at home. That sounds crazy, right? But it's true. Time is flexible. Space is too. And the faster you move, the stranger things become. Most people didn't understand his ideas. Even some scientists laughed. They said, "Who is this young man? He doesn't even work at a university." But slowly, a few experts began to listen. They read his paper again. They checked the math. And they were shocked. "This might be correct," they said. "This changes everything." And then there was that little equation. E equals mc squared. Just 5 symbols. But they held a powerful truth. Mass is a form of energy. Even the tiniest amount of mass contains huge energy inside. That idea would later be used in something terrible, the atomic bomb. But in 1905, Albert didn't think of weapons. He thought of beauty, of balance, of how the universe works. By 1908, universities started calling. They wanted him to teach. Finally, he had a job in science. He left the patent office. He began teaching at small universities in Switzerland and Germany. His lectures were different. He didn't just repeat facts. He asked questions. He made students think. And slowly, the world started to notice. In 1911, he was invited to a special science meeting in Brussels, Belgium. Only the greatest scientists were there. And Albert Einstein, the young man with wild hair, stood among them. He wasn't a clerk anymore. He was a rising star. Back at home, life was not so easy. He and Mileva were growing apart. They had 2 sons now. But Albert was always thinking, always traveling, always busy. Their marriage became cold, silent. In 1914, they separated. Albert moved to Berlin. Mileva stayed in Switzerland with the children. It was painful, but Albert buried himself in work. In Berlin, he kept thinking about gravity. He had a feeling that Newton's idea was not the full story. For years, people believed that gravity was just a pull between objects. But Albert had a new idea, a bold idea. He imagined space like a soft fabric. When something heavy, like the sun, sits on that fabric, it bends. And smaller things, like Earth, roll around it. That's gravity. not a pull, but a curve in space itself. He called this idea general relativity. It took him years to finish it. The math was hard. The thinking was harder. But in 1915, he completed it. Another theory. Another revolution. Now, he just needed proof. And he would get it soon. In the sky. Albert Einstein had gone from a silent child to a rejected student to a lonely patent clerk. Now, he was a scientist changing the world's view of time, space, and gravity. And he was not done yet. Chapter 5. The Famous Formula. It was 1915. Albert Einstein stood before a chalkboard in Berlin. He wrote long equations. He erased. He rewrote. For years, he had worked on this theory. Now, it was ready. He called it general relativity. It was not just about time and speed. It was about gravity. But not the way people knew it. Newton had said, gravity is a force between objects. But Einstein said something new. Gravity is the bending of space and time. What does that mean? Imagine space like a big sheet. If you place a heavy ball on it, the sheet curves. Now roll a smaller ball nearby. It follows the curve. That's gravity. The sun bends space. Earth follows that curve. And we stay in orbit. Simple? Number beautiful? Yes. But Albert had a problem. How do you prove it? How do you show the world that space can bend? Then he had an idea. Light. If space bends, then even light should bend when it passes near a heavy object, like the sun. But we can't see that, right? Because the sun is too bright. Unless there's an eclipse. A total solar eclipse was coming in 1919. It would be visible from parts of Africa. A British scientist, Sir Arthur Eddington, decided to help. He took his team and traveled to the island of Principe, near West Africa. During the eclipse, they photographed stars near the sun. If Einstein was right, the stars would appear slightly out of place. Why? Because the sun's gravity was bending the light, and after the eclipse, that's exactly what they saw. The light had bent, just like Einstein said. The news spread fast. Einstein's theory confirmed. Light bends in space. A new Newton has arrived. Overnight, Albert Einstein became famous. His face appeared in newspapers. His name was known in every country. He was no longer just a scientist. He was a symbol. But fame brings pressure, crowds, questions, cameras. People wanted to hear him speak, to explain his ideas, to share his mind. But not everyone loved him. Some scientists were jealous. Some critics were angry. Some didn't like that he was Jewish. Germany at the time was changing fast. Dark clouds were forming. Still, Albert kept working. He traveled, he spoke, he taught. He met kings and queens. He gave talks in London, Paris, and New York. In 1921, he won the Nobel Prize in Physics, but not for relativity. The prize was for his work on the photoelectric effect, another paper from his miracle year. It didn't matter. He had become a legend. Back at home, Albert lived simply. He wore old clothes. He didn't care about money. He didn't like fancy parties. He preferred walking, thinking, playing his violin. He was famous, but never proud. He once said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." But he began to worry. Europe was changing. New leaders were rising. Hateful voices were growing louder. Albert saw danger coming. He spoke out against war, against racism, against violence. He called for peace, for unity, for human rights. Not everyone listened. Some said he was too political. Others said he should stay in the lab. But Albert believed, the world is not dangerous because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. Albert Einstein had changed physics. Now, he wanted to change hearts. But the world was heading toward a terrible storm, and Albert would soon have to make a painful decision. Chapter 6: Fame and the Fight for Peace. He was now one of the most famous men in the world. People stopped him in the streets. They asked for photos, autographs, interviews. He smiled politely. But Albert Einstein didn't care about fame. He cared about truth. He cared about peace. And he was worried. Very worried. It was the 1930s. A dark wind was blowing across Europe. In Germany, a man named Adolf Hitler had come to power. He spoke with anger. He shouted about pride, and he blamed others, especially the Jews. Albert was Jewish. And not just that, he was a public voice. He spoke against war. He believed in peace. He defended science, reason, and freedom. So what did the Nazis do? They attacked him. Not with weapons, but with words. They called him a liar, a fake, a danger to Germany. One Nazi group even put a price on his head. His house was searched. His books were burned. His name was removed from the Science Academy. It was no longer safe for him in his own country. So, in 1933, Albert made a hard choice. He left Germany. He would never return. He moved to the United States, to a place called Princeton, in the state of New Jersey. There, he began a new life. In America, he worked at the Institute for Advanced Study. It was a quiet place. No students, no big classes, just time to think. Albert loved it. He walked to work every morning. He wore the same sweater every day. He didn't wear socks. And in the afternoons, he played his violin. People in Princeton often saw him walking alone, smiling softly, lost in thought. But behind that smile, he was watching the world, and what he saw frightened him. Germany was building weapons. Armies were marching, and whispers of war were everywhere. Albert was worried about one thing, most of all, nuclear energy. He had written years earlier, E equals mc squared. That tiny equation showed that mass can become energy. Now, scientists had found a new kind of atom, uranium, and they were discovering if you split it, it releases a huge amount of energy, enough to make a bomb, a terrible bomb. What if Nazi Germany got there first? Albert was a man of peace, but he also knew danger. He made a decision, one that he would later regret. In 1939, Albert Einstein wrote a letter to the U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. In the letter, he warned, Germany might build a new type of bomb, and we must not fall behind. This letter helped start the Manhattan Project, the U.S. program to build the first atomic bomb. Albert did not work on the bomb. He was not part of the project. But his letter opened the door. Years later, when he saw what happened, when he saw the destruction in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, his heart broke. He said, "If I had known, I would never have signed that letter." From that moment on, Albert became a loud voice against nuclear war. He spoke to world leaders. He wrote letters. He gave speeches. He warned, "The world has changed. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used to create them." He joined other scientists and activists. They asked nations to stop building bombs, to choose peace over power. But the world was now in the middle of the Cold War. The U.S. and the Soviet Union were racing to build more weapons. Einstein felt helpless, but he never gave up hope. He once said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing." Even in dark times, he believed in light. Even when leaders spoke of war, he spoke of unity. Even as the world changed, he stayed true to his heart. Albert Einstein was no longer just a physicist. He had become a voice for peace, a fighter without weapons, a man who believed that minds and hearts could still save the world. Chapter 7: The Shadow of War. The war had ended. Millions were dead. Cities were broken. And 2 atomic bombs had fallen on Japan. The world had entered a new age. An age of fear. An age of power. Albert Einstein watched from Princeton. He had warned the world, but he never wanted this. He once said, "The release of atomic power has changed everything, except our way of thinking." Now he was older. His hair was white and wild. His eyes were tired, but kind. People still called him genius. They still sent letters, thousands of them. Some asked for advice. Some asked for money. Some just wanted to say, "Thank you." He answered as many as he could, always with respect, always with care. But inside, He was thinking about bigger things, not just physics, not just science, but about humanity. He had seen too much hate, too much war, too many lies. He believed the world needed something more: kindness, responsibility, and courage. He became more active in politics. He supported peace groups. He stood with civil rights leaders. He spoke against racism and injustice. In America, he saw segregation, a system where black and white people were treated unequally. It reminded him of how Jews were treated in Germany. He didn't stay silent. He wrote letters. He gave talks. He invited black students to his home. He said, "Racism is a disease of white people. I do not intend to be quiet about it." Some people didn't like that. They called him a troublemaker. They said, "Stick to science." But Einstein didn't listen. He believed that being human means more than just being smart. It means doing what's right, even when it's hard. Still, his love for science never stopped. He kept asking big questions. How did the universe begin? What holds everything together? Is there one force behind all things? He dreamed of finding a unified theory, a simple idea that could connect all forces in nature: gravity, electricity, magnetism, light. He spent years working on it, but he couldn't find the answer. Sometimes he smiled and said, "God does not play dice with the universe." He believed the world had order, that nothing happened by chance. But others disagreed. New scientists were exploring quantum mechanics, the strange world of particles and uncertainty. They said, nature is random. Einstein said, no, it can't be. The debates were long. He didn't win, but he kept searching until his final days. By now, he was known across the world, not just as a scientist, but as a symbol of wisdom. Magazines printed his picture. Children learned his name. His equation, E equals mc squared, was famous everywhere. But Albert didn't care about praise. He lived simply. He walked to work. He answered letters. He played music. He once said, "A calm and modest life brings more happiness than the pursuit of success." He never returned to Germany, but he never hated it either. He said, "I will always be a Jew, but I will never stop loving the German language, German music, and German thought." Einstein believed in bridges, not walls, in understanding, not revenge. In his last years, he grew weaker, but he still wrote, he still thought, and he still hoped. He wanted the world to learn from its mistakes, to choose peace, to protect the future. He warned, "The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch and do nothing." Albert Einstein had lived through 2 world wars. He had changed science forever, and he had spoken out when many were afraid. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, but he never stopped caring. Chapter 8. the bomb. He didn't want. It began with a letter. Just a few pages, just a warning. Albert Einstein had written it in 1939. He was afraid. Afraid that Nazi Germany might build a bomb. A bomb more powerful than anything the world had seen. And so, he wrote to President Roosevelt. He said, "The science is real. The danger is serious. You must act before it's too late." That letter changed history. The U.S. government listened. They began a secret project. It was called the Manhattan Project. Hundreds of scientists worked on it. They studied uranium and plutonium. They tried to split atoms, to release energy from matter. Einstein's formula, E equals mc squared, showed that this was possible. A small piece of matter could become a giant explosion. But Albert Einstein did not work on the bomb. He wasn't invited. The U.S. military didn't fully trust him. He was German. He spoke freely. He had strong opinions. They feared he might talk too much. So, the man whose letter started the project was left out of it. In 1945, the bomb was ready. 2 bombs were dropped on Japan, in the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Hundreds of thousands died in seconds. The world was shocked, silent. But Einstein was broken. He had warned about the danger, but now the bomb was real. He said, "I made one mistake in my life. I signed that letter to President Roosevelt." He didn't feel proud. He felt responsible. From that day, Albert Einstein became a man with a mission. Not a mission to build, but a mission to stop. He began speaking out. He warned the world about nuclear weapons. He joined scientists and world leaders. They wrote letters, they signed papers, they called for peace. Einstein believed that science had 2 faces. One face could heal. The other could destroy. It was up to humanity to choose. He helped create the Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists. They educated the public. They asked governments to control atomic bombs, to never use them again. Einstein said, "We must change the way we think, or we won't survive." He was not young anymore, but he kept working. Not in a lab, but in letters, in speeches, in quiet warnings. He also thought about world government. He believed that no single country should have so much power. There should be one global law to protect everyone. Some people called him a dreamer, but he said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." He knew the dangers, but he also believed in hope. In 1952, something very strange happened. Israel, the new Jewish state, offered Albert Einstein the position of president. Yes, president of a country. They respected him. They saw him as a hero, as a wise man. But Einstein said no. He answered with humility, "I am deeply moved, but I have neither the ability nor the experience to lead a country." He was a scientist, a thinker, not a politician. He preferred chalkboards, not microphones. Back in Princeton, his life stayed simple. He lived in a small house. He didn't drive a car. He walked everywhere. He still answered letters, hundreds every week. He still played his violin. He still searched for the truth. But time was running out. In 1955, he felt weak. Doctors found something wrong in his belly, an internal bleeding. He could have had surgery, but he refused. He said, "It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share. It is time to go." On April 18th, 1955, Albert Einstein passed away. He was 76 years old. He left no riches, no fancy car, no gold. He left ideas. Ideas that still move the world. He had warned about the bomb. He had dreamed of peace. And even though he couldn't stop the wars, he planted a seed of thought, a seed of wisdom, a seed of hope. Chapter 9. The Quiet Professor. Albert Einstein was gone. He died quietly, in the night, in Princeton. No last speech, no big crowd, just silence. But the world did not forget him. In fact, something strange happened. Something many people don't know. After his death, the hospital doctor did something unexpected. He removed Einstein's brain, without permission. He said he wanted to study the genius, to find out what made Einstein's mind so special. The brain was cut into pieces, stored in jars, sent to scientists. Some studied it, some took photos, some even kept parts of it for years. But did they find the secret? Number. They found small differences, unusual connections, but no one could explain the true magic of Einstein's mind. Because genius doesn't live in a piece of tissue. It lives in how a person thinks, feels, and dreams. While the world talked about his brain, Einstein's friends remembered something else. His heart. He was kind, gentle, humble. He didn't chase money. He didn't care about fame. He cared about truth and justice and peace. He once said, "Try not to become a man of success, but rather a man of value." In Princeton, people missed him, the old man with the wild hair, walking with hands behind his back, talking to himself as he thought about the universe. He had become a local legend. Children called him the man who knows everything. Neighbors saw him feeding birds or reading alone in the sun. He lived simply. He thought deeply. And he laughed easily. His office was left the way it was. Papers everywhere. Chalk on the blackboard. Equations half finished. His final words? No one knows. He spoke them in German, but the nurse didn't understand. Maybe it was a scientific idea. maybe a message to the world, or maybe it doesn't matter, because the real message was already written in his life. Albert Einstein gave the world many things. His science changed how we understand time, space, and energy. But his spirit taught us more. He showed that even a quiet child, even a boy who spoke late, even a man who failed his entrance exam, can change the world. He believed in curiosity. He believed in asking questions. He believed in dreaming, even when others say it's foolish. He said, "The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science." He also believed in peace, deeply. Even after his warnings were ignored, even after bombs fell, he still believed we could do better. He said, "Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding." That's the lesson he left behind. Not just equations, but empathy. Not just discoveries, but dignity. After his death, schools, streets, and centers were named after him. Books were written, films were made. But Einstein would not care about statues or medals. He would care about one thing. Are we thinking? Are we learning? Are we questioning? Are we trying to build a better world? Because that is what he lived for. In the end, Albert Einstein was not just a scientist. He was a philosopher, a humanist, a rebel with compassion. He didn't just ask, "How does the universe work?" He also asked, "What is our place in it?" And maybe that's the greatest question of all. Chapter 10. Time lives on. Time passes. Years become decades. Faces change, memories fade, but some names never disappear. And Albert Einstein is one of them. He died in 1955, but his ideas are still alive. In science, in schools, in the way we think about the world. His voice is gone. But his message? It still speaks. Look around you. Your phone, your GPS, your electricity, even the way satellites move in the sky. All of these exist because of Einstein's ideas. His theory of relativity helps us keep clocks in space correct. His work on light changed how we build technology. His famous formula E equals mc squared opened the door to nuclear power, both good and bad. But Albert gave us more than just science. He gave us a way of seeing, a way of thinking differently. He showed us that questions are powerful, that curiosity is not something to hide, it is something to follow. He said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing." Einstein didn't care about being perfect. He cared about being honest. When he was wrong, he said so. When he didn't know, he admitted it. And when the world was afraid to speak, he spoke against war, against racism, against hate. Even when it was dangerous, even when it made him enemies. because he believed the world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. In schools today, children learn about planets, energy, and space-time. They hear the name Einstein and think of a genius. But he never called himself that. He said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." And maybe that's the real lesson. Genius is not just about big brains. It's about big questions. It's about never giving up, even when others say you're strange. He showed us that one person, one quiet boy, one mind with a dream, can shake the world, not with guns, not with money, but with ideas. He believed in simplicity. He wore simple clothes. He avoided rich events. He walked alone and thought deeply. But his thoughts reached the stars. He asked, "What is time? What is space? What is reality?" And in those questions, he opened the door to a new universe. Today, scientists continue his work. They explore black holes. They study gravitational waves. They test the edges of space and time. And in every step forward, Einstein is there. In the equations, in the theories, in the inspiration. But even more than science, Einstein's story teaches us something deeply human. That it's okay to be different. That it's okay to think in new ways. That kindness and truth matter more than power and pride. So now we ask, what can we learn from his life? What can we carry forward? His courage, his honesty, his passion to learn, his belief that even in a broken world, there is hope? Albert Einstein once said, "A person starts to live when he can live outside himself." He lived that way. He gave his life to learning, to truth, to peace. And though he is gone, time lives on. His light lives on. And so does the dream he left behind. This was the story of Albert Einstein, the boy who spoke late, the man who asked big questions, and the mind that helped the world see time, space, and life in a new way. Thank you for listening. Keep asking, keep learning, and never stop wondering. What if?